Welcome to episode 339 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Kellett.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I am awesome. How are you?
I'm doing well. We got through a deep freeze this weekend in Atlanta, and I think I escaped any sort of burst pipes, so I'm happy about that.
There's nothing more awesome than having to walk your dog twice a day when it's like below zero wind chills and you don't have the kind of clothes you need to weather that storm. So that's been fun.
Don't they make robots for that now? Can't you just buy a robot?
Seems like they should. Seems like they should. It's funny. My sister, my sister who lives in Detroit was in town yesterday, and for the deep freeze, and she was making fun of us. She's like, "This is like t-shirt weather."
Yeah. Well, when you live up there, as we both used to, you're acclimated to it, and you have the clothes for it and the habit for it.
Right.
We don't. We've lost all that. Our blood is thinned. And
Absolutely.
I don't have the clothes anymore. So I get it. Like, I feel weaker as a result, but I get over that real fast when it's, normally 40 degrees throughout winter here. Fahrenheit.
Yes, indeed. All right. So let's go ahead and get in. We have a couple of pretty cool stories to talk about, I think.
Hey,
we'll
where's our disclaimer? Is our disclaimer in here?
It's coming up. It's
okay,
coming up.
All right. Just making sure. I don't want to get sued.
Hold your horses. I do want to say thank you to our Patreon donors. That's the most important thing, right?
It is. They are awesome.
And as a reminder, you can also become a donor at patreon.com/defensivesec, and you will have the high honor of getting our episodes a week early, which is basically, I was going to say valueless, but I think the term is actually priceless.
It is without price, yet we ask you to give us money for it, so therefore it has a price. I'm confused.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on. Here is the slide you were looking for, which is just making it very, very clear that everything we say is a reflection of our opinions and not those of our employers, past, present, or future.
That's true. Are we also going to acknowledge that you're in a new studio space?
Well, so I am, and it's beautiful, isn't it? Like, although I have to tell you, all I did was I turned the camera about 45 degrees. I cleaned out the back. I cleaned out that corner, and so now it's just a different.
So it's not that.
And I have my lamp.
Yeah, that's sign. That is amazing. For those who aren't watching on video, Jerry's got some new background art. Maybe go watch us on video. Get our hours up on YouTube. We still haven't been able to monetize on YouTube yet, so I'm waiting for that first moment when we finally cross enough threshold of watched hours, and you're like, "Here's your 4 cents. Have a good day." But still,
it's gonna be grand. We're gonna frame those 4 cents.
Anyway, so yes.
All right. So,
thoughts ours, opinions ours. Does not represent any employer, past, present, or future. For enough money, maybe it could. We'll see.
That's right. All right, so let's get into our stories today. First up is what I say: patch early, patch often. This is from the Register. The title is "Patch or Perish: Vulnerability Exploits Now Dominate Intrusions."
So I have so much to say, but please,
I know
go
you
ahead.
do. So Cisco is quoted as saying that that they, in their research in the fourth quarter of 2025, exploited vulnerabilities were behind nearly 40% of all intrusions that they detected. And so they make reference to things like React to Shell, which was weaponized and exploited pretty shortly after it was announced. And there certainly were quite a few other things like the Oracle EBS. But I think one of the things we should talk about is, there's been quite a few of these things that have been exploited as 0 days, and there's really not a lot that you can do. in those instances, like you can't, tautologically, there's no patch. You can't. There's nothing to apply yet.
That was a big word.
Yes, that's that's like what happens when you get old.
Is that like a secret word of the day that you have to sneak in to unlock an achievement?
Yeah, it's I lost a bet. I had to sneak that word in.
Oh, I'm impressed.
So they also make reference to a 2024 BitSite report that shows that critical vulnerabilities typically take months, not hours, as they say, to patch, which I don't think is incredibly surprising. But I think it's I don't know how best to say it, but like I feel like we've kind of hit peak patch, right? I don't know that we're generally going to get a whole lot faster at patching.
I think that it's really easy to say patch faster and patch all the things, and you just have to do it. And then when you get into a real world situation with real people, with real bosses asking them to do real revenue generating things, it's really, really, really hard to focus that much on patching. And the thing that often stymies us, at least me, is that those organizations can go, cool. What's the real world risk if I don't patch this? Is there a known 0-day out there? Is there a known exploit out there? No. Well, maybe I'll, and I'm not saying it's the right way to do it, by the way, but that is typically what happens. And you can have SLAs and requirements and guidelines and policy and process. And you could even say you do it for your SOC 2 or your NIST or whatever other compliance regimen you're following. And then real world happens. And those timelines start to slip. And then it becomes okay for those timelines to slip because there was no negative consequence. And this is a really tough one. I fully believe in patching, and I think it's helpful, and I think it's absolutely important. And I think version management and patch management is more than just about vulnerabilities. It's about staying current and keeping up with patches and getting rid of being prepared for when a major patch does come out that has to be applied quickly. You're not so many versions behind, but you're now dealing with, we've had lots of cases that infrastructure teams and sysadmins can point to and say, hey, this patch might break something. I want to let other people have time to test it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a tough problem. And so to come back to your fundamental question, are we at peak patching? Maybe. I don't know. I see some more automated patching regimens starting to build up there, which I think are good. If you look at Google GCP and you're running on their GKE Kubernetes nodes, for instance, those auto patch, the base operating systems and the base packages auto patch, which I think is great. So I see more of that coming, and I would encourage more of that. You're kind of shifting that burden. Now, you also lose control of the timing. If something is critical, you're still having to wait for Google to do it in this instance, as an example. So I would say, in general, yes, I would agree with your statement, which is a long way to say I think we have squeezed as much efficiency out of manual patching as we can. So now it becomes, how much are we willing to trust automated systems to patch faster?
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of organizations, patching SLAs become an exercise of your risk program. Right.
Sure.
Especially as it pertains to like SOC 2 or ISO, because I don't know any organization. I don't think I've ever heard of an organization that applies every single patch within SLA all the time. It's really, and then conversely, you have to ask the question, like if you did, is that a responsible use of resources? I don't know.
That's a really good question, right? Are you over indexing or over committing resources to patch management versus other valuable areas? Because it's a zero sum game, right? It's, if I'm spending all my time patching, I'm not doing something else.
Right. But on the other hand, it's obviously a problem. Like the downsides of not patching are pretty obvious, and we see the results of that all the time. Um, and so I think for me, it comes down to finding ways to to mitigate risks associated with not patching, or let me say that differently, of having unpatched exploitable systems that are perhaps exposed, because like again, they make reference to the Oracle EBS, and we have a story coming up earlier later about Sonic Wall, and when something is a 0-day, and especially if you don't even know that it's happening, until until you get contacted by the ransomware operator or what have you, there's nothing to patch, and so it becomes a question of like, how do you best mitigate the opportunity for those things to be exploited, and knowing that it's not possible to get to zero. Like you're always going to have some amount of exposure. But I think when I look across the many, 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 many stories we've talked about, many incidents I've been involved in personally, a lot of times, I dare I say the vast majority of times, it involves stuff that really had no business being exposed in the first place.
That's true.
And whether there was a patch available or not. So
yeah, it was a design choice. Yeah.
Right. It was a conscious design choice. And I think, as we've talked about in the past, it feels like a lost art of not making everything exposed to the freaking internet. I maybe I'm just getting old. I need to move into the retirement home.
Maybe both. I did have some other thoughts on this too, which is that,
go ahead,
anyone who follows the show is probably like, wait a minute, why are you saying patching or lack of patching or vulnerability exploitation is the majority of attacks? I thought you guys just said like a few shows ago that social engineering was responsible for the majority of exploited organizations in an attack. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so what drives me crazy is one day we get a report like this one here saying, hey, if you don't patch, that's the majority of your problems. Next day we get a different report from somebody else saying, oh, social engineering or vishing or something else is responsible for 80% of exploits and 80% of. It feels like, and I'm sure with the best of intentions, but these reports come out from all these different vendors who have their own bias around what it is they're trying to address and what kind of blinky box they're trying to sell. And I come back to, okay, how do we get objective reality and facts to know how to spend our precious resources and time? If social engineering is my primary threat vector, I'm going to spend my time trying to mitigate that more. If this is telling me that lack of patching is my primary threat vector, okay, then I'll shift it. How do we know what to believe? And I feel like, again, with the best of intentions, all these various organizations drink their own Kool-Aid and they have their own bias, and they're presented as factual research reports on nigh with science-based evidence. I don't think it's true. And I'm not saying there isn't valid data here. I think it's just not rigorous. I think it's not to the level that we should be making a lot of decisions around. Now, the whole point of this show is to try to take information like this and derive insights and share them with people to help their organization, which makes this very frustrating to me. So I struggle with this. I struggle with 2 weeks from now, we'll have another episode and another report that says, hey, deepfakes are your primary threat, 80% of whatever. Authored by Deepfake Defense Company. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a flavor of availability bias, right?
Right.
It's if you survey people about their health habits as they leave the gym versus as they leave the candy store, like you're going to find different things. And I do think that in some instances, like with Cisco and Talos and with Mandiant and a few others, they have both kind of the business angle where they're obviously trying to sell stuff, some services, some product, but they also have incident response services. And so they're, I think in some instances, they're the result of, kind of tabulating the causes of incidents that they've been involved in. And even there, by the way, I think there is a lot of opportunity for data to be skewed, because just as an example, like we know that, or at least I believe, I have no firm data to support this, that companies who believe they've been hacked by China are very likely to hire Mandiant.
Sure.
Right. And so when Mandiant, a lot of what Mandiant responds to and reports on are Chinese threat actor attacks. And, is that because like they have it out for China, or is it because like that's the people who are the victims of those kinds of threat actors are the ones that go and hire Mandiant? And then, Mandiant
Mandiant's
is
known for
right.
being effective in that area, and it becomes like that's their market niche, et cetera, and
right. And so certainly if you're a company who's selling, let's say, user awareness training, you're going to be looking for metrics as it pertains to successful attacks resulting from phishing and and so on. So I think you're right, and it is hard. Like I think the best kind of North Star we have is something like the Verizon data breach report, where even it isn't perfect, but like what they're trying to do is open the aperture so that they're ingesting lots of different sources. But even that is like just think about the totality of incidents that happen in the world and understand that only a very narrow subset of those ever see the light of day, ever get talked about publicly. And then only a narrow set of those we ever know what happened.
Well, that reminds me too of like one other thing I wanted to say about this report was patching. They talk about exploits and exploitability and making sure you're patched and exploited. But I think we have seen plenty of evidence that it's a very small percentage of actual vulnerabilities in the world that have widespread exploitation. It's under 5%, I believe. Last stat, again, we're talking about the accuracy of these stats, so take that with a grain of salt. But let's say that's true. Hindsight, knowing which 5% you need to patch would be is easy. Knowing it ahead of time is what's so hard. And that's a challenge I often have too when I'm discussing this with stakeholders in organizations is, hey, I can't tell you which 5% are going to get popped, but I know 5% will. So the safest thing is to patch everything. And the natural inclination is, okay, but how do I prioritize? Which is a fair ask. And there are lots of ways to do that, right? What's open to the internet and what's looks like a higher exploitability score. And there's all sorts of methods people are trying to do to help answer that prioritization question. But the other challenge is sometimes we don't know. We can't predict it. We're not as good as every bad guy out there, and we don't know how they're going to figure out new and interesting novel ways to exploit things. So it's a tough problem. It's a really tough problem.
I think there's certainly a cottage industry emerging around trying to help prioritize what things you should fix. And that ranges everywhere from something as dumb as the CVSS score to, things like Tenable's Viper score and lots more sophisticated, AI driven stuff that contemplates, where the system is placed in your network and all that, all sorts of stuff like that. But even those aren't going to be perfect, right? And I think the other concern I have is that it's ever changing and somewhat ephemeral, because it's not like, and this is something we've talked about in the past. When a vulnerability is disclosed, it might not look high, like a high severity thing at the time, but it might certainly turn into one in the future. And a lot of vulnerability programs don't contemplate the possibility for the urgency of something changing in the kind of the normal course of business. Something might
Right.
end up being like a low priority that you're going to give yourself 180 days to fix, but then tomorrow you find out, well, geez, like it can be chained with this other thing, and like it's super trivial to exploit, and it's causing lots of problems, and therefore its urgency goes way up, and that's a deficiency in a lot of programs for sure.
This is one thing, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this article and we can move on soon, but this is one thing I've always wanted to see in these pwn to own competitions is cool. You've got 0 days, you're demonstrating and you're doing a good job of finding new exploits. Cool. Pay you for that. Great. Now round two. Let's deploy the top 5 well-regarded EDR, XDR systems on what you're trying to pop and then see what still lands. And show me, do I have true 0-day defense? And nobody seems to want to do that at those events.
Yeah, I think they've tried that. Back in the antivirus days, right?
Yeah.
And those ended up kind of being a bit of a goat rodeo where the vendors were given a chance to um, make amends, because look, the people who are putting those things on have to, they have to pay the bills, and so they, it's anyway. I agree. I think that would be a fantastic, an extremely valuable thing for the industry. And not only that, like it would provide a lot of insight that would be helpful to customers, but also it would drive, I think, vendors to actually make their products do what they say.
Yeah. But would the squealing be loud? Oh, you didn't set it up right. Oh, you didn't do this. Oh, you're violating terms of service. It's like,
that's right. You clearly didn't hire our busload of contract or consultants to come in and implement this.
but it is something like I would love to, because that's what we're really talking about, right? Vulnerability management and patch management is to keep from getting compromised. Cool. That's one way to do it. We're sold all this other stuff of other ways to do it, like detection and response systems from XDR and EDR and whatnot. And cool. Let's see how those work in a real world against real 0 days. In a controlled public environment. Anyway.
All right.
Now moving I'm depressed. On. Good job.
I aim to please. All right. Moving on to our next story. Phishing is just so hot right now. So hot. So the title here is Mandiant finds Shiny Hunter style phishing attacks stealing MFA to breach SaaS platforms. And this is from the Hacker News, by the way. So this article is talking about how Mandiant is, speaking of Mandiant, they have put out some recent alerts indicating that Shiny Hunters has apparently pretty dramatically ramped up their attacks using voice-based phishing to harvest credentials, and through a couple different, I won't call them novel because I think they're pretty well-worn paths, but they're apparently having some luck with it. So they are they're using fake domain, fake websites that they're calling up and pretending to be either suppliers, vendors, or IT staff, trying to quote work through some technical problems with the ultimate goal generally of getting enough access to register a Shiny Hunter's own device in their MFA portal, so that then allows them to access the SaaS platform, which then allows them to steal the data, and then you kind of know the rest. Now, we've talked about in the past, like this is not necessarily a new thing. Like there's been lots of attacks on Salesforce, which has been interesting, by the way, because like that's kind of fallen away. Like I haven't heard a Salesforce breach in probably a month or two. So for a while there, it was a daily occurrence. It felt like.
I no comment.
I understand, but so to Mandiant / Google's credit, they actually did post a kind of a fact sheet on how to mitigate it. And I think in maybe 10 episodes back, we actually covered that. They've updated that, and it's actually really good. We're not going to have time to go through all of their recommendations, but I highly recommend that you do, because it actually it talks about this concept of like establishing a lockdown mode, which I thought was pretty novel, where you are, you're not allowing new MFA registrations. You are changing the behavior of your help desk people in response to some perceived upticks in attacks or what have you.
Yeah, it's
Let's
a
see.
good report. I would, it is very long, but it has a lot of real actionable real world hardening, logging, and detection sort of recommendations, like very specific things for very specific systems. You have Okta set up for these type of alerts. If you're, for hardening, do these settings, and very actionable information about, hey, here's how your help desk can do a better job of verifying who's calling in to ask for things. And yeah, it's long. It's probably a good 10 pages if it was printed out, if not more. And certainly something I would recommend most customers of these tools read, because the bad guys are getting better. But there's some good stuff, and some of this is based around, hey, spotting very specific behavior that's being used in these attacks. So it's a very high fidelity alert, which is always helpful and useful. But yeah,
For
it
sure.
was good. And hey, kudos to them for putting out the recommendations. I think that this is good community behavior that breeds goodwill, and very actionable, useful advice that they get very deep insights into. So I'm glad they're publishing this kind of stuff.
Right. Absolutely. They in the article they kind of close out with saying, it is really important that you implement phishing resistant authentication like passkeys, but I think it should not be lost that the kinds of attacks they're trying to perpetrate here are not necessarily relying on on traditional credential theft. Like, what they're trying to accomplish is ending up with a device or a capability to generate their own passkeys. And so it's this is I think some of these tactics are in response to some adoption of phishing resistant credentials. So
Yeah.
like they
So
are taking
now
a
I'm not
different
trying to
tack.
steal it. Now I'm not trying to steal it. Now I'm trying to register a device that has the
Right.
ability to do a valid authentication through the valid mechanisms, basically mimic that I've added some new user and some new enrollment method to an existing user in some way.
Right. So some of the new content is, I didn't do like a side by side comparison of the old version of their recommendations versus the new, but it, one of the things that appears to me is it's focusing a lot more on the validation of the person who is asking for help, because what they're trying to do is, is mimic, an authorized person who needs help resetting their account and establishing an MFA on their device, again, as you pointed out, so that they actually have the ability to generate their own MFA codes.
Yeah, and just specifically to go in some of that stuff. So the context here is that somebody's engaging with help desk to add a new authenticator or reset a code, which is typically the bad actor trying to get their own authenticator added to that account. So they talk about things, and quoting from the article, require a live video call where the user holds a physical government ID next to their face. The agent must visually verify the match, confirm the ID, and the name on the ID matches the employee corporate record. Require out of band approval from the user's known manager before processing the reset. Reject requests based solely on employee ID, SSN, and manager name. That's very, very readily available. And Shiny Hunters has that today. If the user calls the help desk for a password reset, never perform the reset without calling the user back at a known good phone number to prevent spoofing. Mostly good. I would almost go some sort of if they still have access to like a corporate messaging system, that would be good to hopefully, I mean, multiple authentications is better, but phone numbers are so, and eSIMs and this kind of stuff, that could get a little dicey depending on your risk tolerance and the riskiness of the access. If a live video call is not possible or require an alternate high assurance path, it may be required for the user to come in person to verify their identity. And optionally, after a completed interaction, the help desk agent can send an email to the user's manager indicating the change is complete with a picture from the video call of the user who requested the change on camera. Hoping at that point that the manager goes, that's not my employee. But of course, deepfakes and such can get around that. So what this is really trying to do is positively identify the individual, is what it really comes down to, which makes sense. And it's getting harder and harder as we have better AI ability to spoof this stuff from at least a visual and auditory standpoint.
Yeah, given that everybody posts their employer and job title and picture on LinkedIn, we're giving a lot of tools to the attackers to use deepfakes and whatnot. So this is definitely not the end, but I think the kind of the North Star here is to is to improve or up the validation of the person who's contacting the help desk. That's my takeaway on this round of attacks is really that they're exploiting social engineering of help desks and whatnot. So it's good stuff. I highly recommend you read it. Obviously, it's something they continue to update, so probably bookmark it and refer back to it occasionally.
Indeed. Agreed.
All right. So moving on, we have, this is a little bit of a follow-up to a story we talked about, I think 2 or 3 shows ago, where SonicWall had initially said that their cloud backup service, which backed up the configuration and other data in SonicWall firewalls, affected something like 5% of their customers. And then they came back like a month or so later and said, "Oh no, we were wrong. It actually impacted all of the customers." But I hadn't heard of anybody actually getting burned by this, even though it seemed like a pretty significant problem. But now we have a company called Marquee Software Solutions, who is some sort of financial services provider, falling victim to a ransomware attack. And initially, it was believed that this was the result of an unpatched SonicWall device, but now they're saying that this is actually the result of the data stolen in that backup attack being used to breach Marquee's SonicWall. And now, interesting, like if you look at the timing, the Marquee incident happened in August of 2025, and the SonicWall disclosure was on September 17th. So, like, Marquee didn't even know, or any other SonicWall customers didn't even know this had happened until like a month later after the actual attack had happened. So it obviously had been going on for a while by the time SonicWall figured out what's going on and made their disclosure.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's a little unclear to me how this attack worked exactly, but they're saying that they got the backups, and using the backups, they were to bypass the firewall with the details in the backups. So that could mean a lot of things. It could mean that they could see the firewall rules and figure out what was open. It means that they could get some sort of authentication information or something. I don't know. I don't know how exactly the attacker used the firewall backup to get around the firewall. And I don't think it's disclosed yet, but I would be very curious what that attack path was.
Since I'm one to wildly speculate,
please do.
My guess is that the backup contained an administrative ID for the firewall, which allowed the attacker to go in and create a VPN account for that they could use, and then they were able to log in through the firewall and get into the network. So my guess is that there was some other vulnerability inside the company's network, but I think that was most likely how they got through.
It's a reasonable hypothesis. I wouldn't disagree with your wild speculation.
It is wild speculation.
But so it also...
This is a hard one, right? Again, as we talked about, like, this is a tough one because unless you just didn't use that service, you were exposed.
But what's somewhat interesting to me, too, is they talk about this, like at the end of their notification update about this, they said, based on, I'm quoting from their post here, based on the ongoing third-party investigation, we've determined the threat actor that attacked Marquee was able to circumvent our firewall by leveraging configuration data exfiltrated from the service provider's cloud backup breach. At this time, Marquee is evaluating its options with respect to the firewall provider, including to seek recoupment of any expenses spent by Marquee and its customers in responding to the data incident. So, kind of pretty much saying, hey, SonicWall, you owe us. You got breached. And it feels like this entire post was, oh, no, this wasn't because we didn't apply a patch, by the way. So it's not our fault. It's SonicWall's fault.
It's the other thing was that occurred to me, and it's a little more subtle, but we often have talked in the past about the need for speed with making public disclosures. And this is an example of, as far as I can tell, where they made a public disclosure based on information that later turned out to be wrong.
Now, when you say they, do you mean SonicWall or Marquee?
I mean Marquee, sorry. So
no,
Marquee
because they both did.
Right.
Because SonicWall also said only 5% of its customer base was impacted, and then came back and said everybody was impacted. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal from your point, but...
No, but I mean, I think both of them were not great, but in the case of Marquee, like they flogged themselves when they basically said, hey, it looks like we didn't patch a firewall, and that resulted in this breach. But then they came back later and said, nope, just kidding. It wasn't that. We actually did patch our firewall. It was this SonicWall cloud issue.
Well, I think what they said was, we were evaluating a patch at the time, but hadn't applied it. And now we've determined this patch would have had no impact whatsoever on this breach. Right.
Yeah.
So whether we applied it or not is immaterial to the discussion of the breach. Is the way I read it. Which feels like their lawyers are very heavily involved in crafting that message.
Oh, yeah. I obviously have no idea what's in their contract, but I have a feeling this is going to be an uphill slog, and they're going to end up having to prove some kind of gross negligence on the part of SonicWall, which, I mean, maybe this does feel like one of those things that will end up getting settled out of court, because no one wants that discovery.
Yeah. Which I don't know if we talked about it, but the CrowdStrike has that going on from their big outage almost 2 years ago now, and a bunch of those lawsuits got dismissed. But the big one, which I think is Delta versus CrowdStrike, as far as I know, is still ongoing. So.
Yeah, I think the latest one that was dismissed was the investor lawsuit.
Right.
Which I think would have been a big, that would have been a big deal if it had proceeded. But I think they in that case they just the judge decided that there was that it didn't meet the level of malfeasance to deceive, or intention to deceive investors. So, but it's interesting. I think there's been a couple of others. I want to say that I can't remember the big drawing a blank. The big breach from a couple years ago. It's on the tip of my tongue, where the CISO was being criminally charged. I think that got dropped too.
SolarWinds,
yeah. It's hell getting old, man.
Well, you cover so many of these that they do kind of blend together after a while. Until we get the Elon Musk chips in our brain, recall is not always great.
True. It's true. All right. So moving on to our next one. Llamas just want to be free. So Ollama, if for those of you who are not in the know, is a it's an open source AI framework basically that allows you to use a lot of different open source and perhaps closed source AI. I think it's primarily LLM models, and so you can kind of run your own Chat GPT style thing on your own computer using Ollama plus some model that you get from usually Hugging Face, which is a whole other debacle for another day.
Which, for the
Anyway,
record, every time I hear the term Hugging Face, I can only think of the alien face hugger.
it
I
does.
understand. It's
Yes.
I get that it's meant to be about the emoji, but I just think alien facehugger. Sorry, that's just the way my brain works.
What was the name of the company?
Waylon Utoni
No,
from
the
Alien.
company. No, from Half Life. Those are
Oh yes. Oh yes. Black Mesa.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yes,
yes. That's the company, or that's the Hugging Face that I keep thinking of as
that's true.
the little crabs
Yes.
that jump on your face. Anyway,
Well, Black Mesa, I think, was a location. Is that I have to go look, man. Someday Half Life 3 will come out, and that will, mark the end of time. But anyway, back complete off topic. Back
they
to you.
just sometime after Grand Theft Auto 6, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, the deal here is that Hugging Face, by default, the way you interface with it is it listens on a network socket, typically bound to your local host, so it's not exposed anywhere. However, as people are wont to do, it's pretty trivial to change that so it does listen on a public interface. And what they have found, what this is a Sentinel-1/Census investigation, they found that there are 175,000 Ollama instances exposed to the internet, which
Which
typically
is your favorite?
does not have any authentication at all whatsoever.
What could go wrong?
And what could go wrong? And so, obviously one of the downsides is like they can be weaponized. Bad guys can kind of steal your processing power. But in some instances, some of these actually are wired to into agents, and so depending on what those agents are capable of doing and how they're configured, they could do lots of different things. And so now you have a situation where a bad guy can effectively induce your publicly accessible Ollama instance to do whatever the heck they want. And so they point out in this article, like, this isn't a theoretical problem. Like there's an actual network, criminal network, that has been set up to act as an entry point where you can buy a subscription, like a monthly subscription, and it will route you to one or more, however, based on, I guess, how much you pay, these open Ollama instances for, presumably, nefarious purposes. So like you can, you're leveraging, this compute power in some sort of an anonymous way. So, to do whatever bad things you are looking to do. But this is a real thing. Like you can actually go and do it today, and they're leveraging these 175,000 exposed instances. And what concerns me, and the next story is very similar to this. What concerns me is that we collectively are like racing so fast towards embracing AI. I don't know how many of these are running at somebody's house. I have a feeling it's very few, versus at in a company's cloud environment, and they're just unknowingly exposed because like this isn't people haven't been burnt en masse yet, but like this, like we are building an incredible amount, if I make a physics analogy, an incredible amount of potential breach energy. It's accumulating.
Potential breach energy, so PBE. We've got to come up with the PBE scale and start publishing reports on PBE, because I think that's brilliant. So a lot of these may be at home, but I bet you they're connected on the back end to a corporate entity as well, which is even scarier. Yeah. Well, also, I'm sure at least
the thing that made me think that they're probably not at home is a lot of home users have NAT, and so wouldn't be visible to a census scanner anyway.
Although it's very easy to forward through NAT if you know what you're doing.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Whatever your device is, but you're right. You're right. And of these, I'm sure at least 1,000 of these are some sort of honeypot from some sort of security research organization. But I'm sure the 99.9% are actual just. And how many of these were set up and then abandoned and forgotten about and are just out there running?
People's work laptops.
Or whatever, right? It's maddening. And I've got a bunch of notes actually in the next story, which is very similar, and I can wait for that one. But I think this is just going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. We are on a linear. I don't even know what's linear, but we are just exponentially increasing the ability for bad decisions to be made with computing by lots of not technically sophisticated people, and the bad guys are salivating as we do this.
When I read this story, and for the sake of time, we'll just kind of dovetail into the next one, which is about ClaudeBot, aka Moltbot, aka OpenClaw, and I'm sure that it'll have a new name by the time I publish
the hottest thing to hit the internet this week.
Oh my God, ClaudeBot gone wild. So, there isn't like a anything alarmingly bad associated with ClaudeBot yet. There's a lot of like hand wringing around it, but I think when you pair these things together, it paints a picture, and we've talked about in the past. This is not dissimilar to what we saw in times gone by with the adoption of cloud computing. The business is doing this. Like, you are on the bus or you're not on the bus. Like, the business is doing this. We can say that it's stupid. We can say that it's not going to yield any value, and it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, your opinion on it doesn't matter. The business is going to do it. And so what they're really looking for is, like, is there a safer way to do it? And I think that's one of the best things we can hope for at this point is like trying to put some sort of, I wouldn't even call it guardrails, but like a way to facilitate experimentation in a way that is reasonably safe, that if it blows up, it's not going to like cause your CEO to go have to testify in front of Congress.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of points I had in my notes too, is that this is happening. And there was actually, I don't have the notes ready, so I'll butcher this, but there apparently was an interesting thing where when ClaudeBot got contacted by Claude AI, they're like, hey, you should change your name. And they changed it. Apparently there was a whole, like, as they were changing it, somebody stole the domain or the name and they spun up a whole cryptocurrency thing. And like within seconds, I was like, wow, but not what we're covering here. But I do think these things are spinning up so fast, and it's such a huge area of experimentation. And we're seeing it develop so rapidly that security and governance are well behind the curve on this stuff. And it's happening far faster than we're able to keep up with and to manage risk and advise around. And that's, I think, the big scary part for all of us we don't want to stop innovation, but we also don't understand the risks or how to mitigate the risks very well as an industry. And I think that the bad guys are far further ahead of us in terms of figuring out ways to exploit this stuff than we are figuring out ways to defend against it. And I think that's somewhat by design of these things are so powerful and meant to be so powerful and so democratized in terms of being able to be set up by non-technical people that it's running very fast. And I honestly, although to your point, if we stand in the way of this, we're going to get run over. But part of me says reading what Claudebot can do or Moltbot is so powerful. And a lot of people are just installing on their local systems and giving you access to all of their data, including their corporate data. And I'm sure that's happening with as shadow AI right now in a lot of corporations. And I would say, hey, you need to have a serious conversation. Do you just want to outright find and ban this? And if you want to have governance over this, you also probably need to not allow your local admin rights on your machines, because if they have it, there's so much propaganda out there about using AI for good or bad, right? That, and including our own executives, are telling our people, get on board with AI or you're no longer relevant. You're going to lose your job. And so everybody's got this incentive to just experiment and play. And this is super dangerous to a corporation. I know that makes you sound like a Luddite and a fuddy-duddy or whatever, but these are so powerful. And they talk about this in articles too, about, hey, somebody sends you an email and it's read by Claudebot and it's full of instructions of like, go grab all the secrets and email to me. And it works, right? We don't understand any of that yet. And I think they're incredibly powerful. They're not well understood. The attackers are ahead of the defenders. So I think with all these companies rushing into this, security is well behind the curve, as I said. And ultimately, what I think this boils down to is there's going to be some serious problems before we start to get some balance back. And I do feel like the entire corporate world is absolutely transfixed by this unfulfilled promise of AI. And they are taking tremendous risks. And we're not going to stop it, by the way. And I think if we are trying to stop it, we're probably just going to get pushed aside, as you said. And, I think you're hinting at, the best thing you could probably do is probably come up with some sort of safer way, like some sort of like controlled way. But man, this stuff's happening so fast. And so let's say you're a Claude shop. Like, hey, Claude's our AI of choice, and we've got a DPA with Claude and an MSA with Claude, and it's protected. So go use Claude. Cool. You know what? Claude can't do this one thing this new LlamaBot can do, and I'm going to go use LlamaBot because it's cool and I can go faster. And hey, boss, look at this cool thing I did. That's awesome. You're awesome. Oh, sorry, just exposed all of our secrets to China. Oh, well, you experimented. It's okay. I am very concerned and a little disheartened that we are just going to have to faceplant into the hot burning stove before this is going to calm down.
I'm not even sure that that's necessarily going to calm it down. I don't know what will calm it down. The way I think you characterized it is kind of well put. Like, there's a lot of investment. I think a lot of executives and boards have this intuition that there is an incredible amount of savings and efficiencies and probably to some extent even innovation locked up. If we could just figure out how to type the right thing into our AI agent, like we'll be $1 trillion company in no time. And I think there's a lot of that happening, and certainly if you pair that with the investment that a lot of companies have made into AI, there's I was having a discussion with my son. He works at he's not in IT, but he obviously works with he's in an office job, and like they all have AI adoption metrics. Like, it's part of his performance review. Like, he's got to show that he's done, something I don't fully understand how they quantify that with AI. And I think that's becoming pretty common. And so like we're companies are actively incentivizing people to go off and experiment. And I guess what I'm proposing is like, boy, wouldn't it be cool if the security team were kind of at the table there saying like, and by the way, like we have this place for you to do your experimentation. Is all the tools you want. But I think your point is spot on. Claudebot, nobody had heard about 3 weeks ago. I mean, it existed before then, but like 3 weeks ago, nobody had heard about it. Very few. I mean,
And
very few people. And
if
now
I'm an
it's like
AI
there's
guy, yeah, I'm like, I can't let security stop me. They don't know what they're talking about.
right. So like your best intentions are are probably not even good enough because it's just moving so fast. Like they're talking about how, again, I had never heard of Claudebot before, about a week and a half ago, and they're talking about how this one company is claiming that 22% of the employees across their customer base are actually using Claudebot specifically. I don't know how big of a population that is. I don't know how much like availability bias or confirmation bias is baked into that, but like that is a remarkably fast adoption of technology that like when you read it, when you read what it is, and it is cool. Like I'm not taking away from any of that, but like it's mostly been vibe coded, right? Its intention is like it's a framework for running agentic AI and kind of wiring it into the kind of your normal workflow for email and web browsing and your calendar management and all this. And as I've heard, like it's spurred a resurgence in the purchase of used Mac Minis. Like it's caused the price of used Mac Minis to go up because there are so many people buying it to run. I guess it's now called OpenClaw. I should call it by its right name, because they don't necessarily want to run it on their actual computer. They want to run it somewhere else. But holy cow, this is coming like a fast moving freight train. And
And it's just
I
one of
don't,
many, right? I mean, this is
yeah,
just an example of what's going to keep happening. There's
in
going
a
to be
month
these,
we're gonna have something
yeah,
else. Like it's gonna,
yeah.
who knows what it'll be shrimp bot, it'll be llama bot, like you said, llama bot. It's gonna be something else. Is this the start of that uh, um, singularity we always heard about? I don't know.
And I don't mean to be so negative about it. I mean, they're probably really useful tools. I just see this actually likely leading to a lot of mistrust between security and their users because the
Yeah,
users are just out
yeah.
doing stuff like this.
Oh yeah, don't misunderstand. Like I I, I am quite certain. And, multiple things can be true at once, right? We are in an AI bubble. AI isn't going away, right?
Yeah.
There was a time, there was a cloud bubble. Look around, cloud is still here. Like a lot of businesses went out. There was a dot-com bubble. Guess what? The internet's still here. A lot of companies went out of business. As we get, we're going to go through that. There's going to be a lot of the names that exist today in the AI space probably won't exist in a couple of years. But that is a different question than, is AI going to be a thing? And we're not going to unring that bell. And so
Right.
companies are going to continue pressing forward and trying to figure out how to make effective use out of this thing. And they're going to make some ugly mistakes along the way. And some of those ugly mistakes, I fear, are going to be like widespread pandemic level events.
I tend to agree. And maybe that's the way it has to be. Maybe that's the creative destruction aspect of experimenting with new technology. Maybe we just have to accept the risk. But there's a huge
Yeah.
risk here.
Huge risk. huge risk. But again, we're not going to change it. Like it's not. It's
Yeah, and we're not advising you walk in and tomorrow and tell your business to not touch this stuff, because you'll probably just get ignored and then not have a seat at the table. I think what we're all searching for, how do we limit the damage? And I don't have a good answer yet.
So the other thing, again, back into the spirit of multiple things can be true at once. We've said it before. If you think about, like, I right now, IT and security is going through a pretty ugly professional transformation. Like, we are seeing kind of unprecedented levels of layoffs and not, unemployment and difficulty in finding jobs and whatnot. Not like writ large, there's other industries have obviously had this for a long time. It's just that for, since its inception, IT has kind of been on a constant upward trajectory, and now it's more of like a sawtooth. And so it's still high. There's still jobs. Like, it's still a great industry. I'm not trying to say anything about that, but I think we have to be cognizant that, like, the kinds of things that companies are valuing today are not what they were valuing before. What they're going to value tomorrow is going to be different. And so, like, if you think about from a security professional, if I were coming into it today, I would be thinking about, like, how do I bring the vision around AI as it relates to the function of security in my company, and how do I help the company better adopt AI in a secure way, like, in terms of my kind of core mission of keeping the company and its information safe, and not being resistant to it, but trying to become more of a facilitator. It might still not work. Like, let's not mince words. Like, they may say, it's all really interesting, but we're going to take the risk. We don't, just go back and focus on, patching the web server. That's a possible outcome. But I think some companies, and I suspect an increasing number of companies, especially as people start touching that hot stove, there's going to be a demand for people who can help companies through the forest and adopt AI in a more secure way. That's how I see it.
That's fair. I think you're reasonably correct. I also wonder, are we able to effectively communicate the risk that is being accepted to leaders? I don't think we are.
That's a good question. It's a really good question. The answer to that is almost certainly no. Anyway,
on that cheery note,
so look, I know this, it's kind of maybe it seems like a depressing thing, but we are in a transformational moment, right? And I will tell you, on a personal level, every time there's been uncertainty, it has worked out in my favor, professionally and personally, if I embrace that and try to figure out, like, how do I help lead through that. And so I would just say, like, think about it through that lens. And I know that it's not everybody's on board with that. There's a lot of naysayers. And I'm super skeptical. I think a lot of the use cases that people are trying to, slap AI into is complete and utter bullshit. I think it's just like, I don't see it. But I'm also pragmatic, and that I know that, just like the internet and cloud, this is happening, and we are here as it is being formed.
That's true. I think that's optimistic. Now I just got to figure out, how do we take that mindset and translate it into behavior and actions in real world. And it's a whole new subculture in the IT industry that we've got to learn about.
Yes. Yes. And I think the people who figure that out are going to be the ones that are successful in the coming years. So,
fair enough.
There you have it. So that is the show for this week. Thank you very much. A quick reminder that you can find links to all the stories we talked about on our website. It's defensivesecurity.org. Just look for episode 339. We have the most awesome YouTube page on all of YouTube. It's at Defensive Podcast. It's just that like the rest of the world hasn't figured out that it's the most awesome page yet. But we know that's going to happen anytime now.
True. We're huge in one little tiny country off the coast of Africa.
Right. Huge. And just another call out, if you would like to support our little endeavor here, you can do so on our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. And in the meantime, if people want to reach out and bother you, how can they do that?
I'm on X and infosec.exchange, which is your phenomenal Mastodon server. At Lerg, L-E-R-G.
Awesome. And I am also on infosec.exchange. It's at Jerry, and that is typically the best place to get me. I hang out every now and then on LinkedIn, but mostly because it's kind of like watching videos of like car crashes and train crashes. Like it's kind of that sort of thing.
It's gotten to be very special. It's a very special place.
Yeah. It's like it's just like AI bots kind of talking to each other. I don't enjoy that.
And when I say special, I mean short bus special.
All right, that is the end. You made it.
Thank you for listening. Appreciate you guys. Hope you found something useful out of this. And we'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.